Hey, everybody. Welcome to SF Indie Fest presented in this delicious virtual world of ours. As is the kind of case with film festivals, we always feel it's important to kind of be able to not only be able to screen cool independent films that are out there as they're kind of making their way out there in the world, but also to kind of shed some light on the behind the scene nature of making independent film. We're lucky enough to have local filmmaker Ray Day here, the director, writer, and producer extraordinaire behind Truth Be Told, Irving Norman, and The Human Predicament. Thanks again for sharing the film, Ray.
Thank you for having me here. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. For those that don't know, Ray is a great production sound guy. Works on many documentaries and feature films that probably seen at SF Indie Fest over the years, and so it's exciting to kind of see this feature-length independent film you've put together, Ray. Maybe a good way to start is, how did you first kind of discover Irving Norman's work, and what made you know that there was kind of a film there to be made?
Well, there's a photographer friend here in Half Moon Bay named Susan Friedman. Back in 1996, she was putting together a very small film about Irving. And she wanted me to shoot some of the paintings. And that's the first time I saw them. And it was just staggering to see them. I still remember that time. I mean, I did shooting Betacam back in those cameras. And I spent a couple of hours filming the ones that were at Hala Norman, his wife's house. And it just sort of one thing led to another. That show went on. It was successful at the De Young. And then I was just starting to learn website design. I created my own website. I created another website for one other person. And I thought, well, this is perfect for Irving. So I decided to put a website together for him. And it's being hosted through Laughing Squid. That was supposed to be here, but now is in New York City. There was a problem with the images because what happened in 1989 is there was such a 1988, late 88, there was a fire that destroyed a lot of his work in a way, a lot of slides and things like this. And Hala was able to gather some in a dresser drawer and carry them out as the house burned down behind them. But from those photos, I sort of started putting together the website. And then it just seemed like a natural progression to go from there to a book. And it turned out there's a lot of lucky circumstances here because the Crocker Bank and the Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento, they were building an extension to it. And all of a sudden that extension postponed. So they had gallery space open and they didn't know what to do with it. So they suggested, well, maybe we could put Irving's work, one big traveling show this was 2005. And then they said, you have a design for a book? I said, yeah. I showed them the design and they said, okay, we'll run with it, go with it and see what happens. I picked up a grant money for this, and Hala and I traveled to Los Angeles and all over Northern California, redoing all of the images that we could find, whether they were in warehouses or people's homes. And so we spent pretty much the fall of 2005 doing that. And Heyday Books out of Berkeley, they published the book. And I was really lucky there because nobody mucked with it. They were having some kind of interpersonal hassles or something there in the company. So there wasn't really anybody focusing necessarily on the book to kind of mess with it and change it and do all this. So what I gave them, they actually, except for the text, because I wasn't very good with putting text, they put the book together for me. And it came out in the fall of 2006 along with the exhibition. So I had all of these wonderful images. It was a company called Better Light out of Burlingame. And they do these large format, files of images. They have banks of HMIs and 200 megabyte images. Well, 200 megabyte back in 2006 was a lot. And stuff. And they brought some of Irving's works are so big. This was what was needed to really capture the size of some of these things. Some of them are one called Crucifixion is 27 feet long and about 7 feet wide.
Oh, wow.
And War and Peace, I think, is, if I remember, 13 feet wide and 8 feet tall. It's a triptych. And so all of these had to be put together in sections. And so I think it must have been about 7 shooting days to get all these images, all these paintings in, photographed, and then shipped back to their storage areas and things. And then from that, late fall, Hala and I, between late fall of 2005 and 2006, we photoshopped a lot of this stuff, get rid of all the sparkles and things like this from the lights reflecting off the paintings. And so by late April, we had all of the images together, and this was Hayday's first digital book. That's this thing here. I don't know whether you could, is that title showing up properly?
Dark Metropolis.
Yeah. And it's Irving Norman's Social Surrealism. So this was the book that was put together. And they were nervous about it being a digital book. So I had to get every image on there in an 8x10 form to send off to Taiwan for printing. So the exhibition was a success. It ended up in Washington, D.C. And the book was, I guess, fairly successful, I guess. I still have a bunch of copies lying around. But from that, all that stuff between websites, book, I had all the images I needed right there because they were all really, pretty dense files. And but like in 2007, I just realized I had to get these interviews done. I don't know, something just told me it's probably a good time to do it because Hala passed in 2010, and another gentleman who's in the film passed a year later. So I couldn't wait around to do these. And so I shot all the interviews in 2007, except for one, and that was shot in 2013. And that was Michael Bell. He loved Irving's work and really cared about Irving and Hala. And he stopped being a curator over in Oakland and moved to Joplin, Missouri. Said he was never going to do another interview ever again, except he'd do this one for Irving. So I kidnapped a cameraman. We were working in Arkansas at the time, and we drove 4 hours up and did Michael Bell's interview. And I'm really glad I got that. And he agreed to do it because he really made the film in many ways. And then from there, it just slowly putting the film together, getting some money here and there.
What do you think, you first saw Irving's work, I guess, about 30 something years ago, right?
96, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, 25 years ago. What is it that you think stuck in your head that you just, you didn't want to let go and you wanted to kind of do this deep dive? What do you think resonated to you personally?
It's just the imagery. You really have to see one in person. You can look at the book, you can see the film, but when you actually stand in front of his works, it's staggering. It's the detail, the care he took, and coming up with the ideas. I have no idea where these images came from, or these concepts in his head. His idea was to make. He wanted he wanted his paintings in museums. He wanted people to sit down and look at these paintings and contemplate them. As naive as all this may seem to people, he feels that people looking at his works, they will change. They will become more humane in a way by looking at his works. I don't know what he would say about today and the politics today. He would just be probably keeping really busy painting. Been going on. But that was his goal. He wasn't looking for money. He wasn't looking for fame. And, he struggled for acceptance in the art world for years. But he wouldn't compromise. People were saying, look, there's plenty of money for you to be made if you just do this abstract expressionism or this kind of work or that kind of work. You've got the talent. Why not do it? He wouldn't do it.
What do you, from the interviews and the kind of story shared, how do you think the Bay Area kind of, either influenced his approach to things or gave him the freedom to, pursue the kind of creative inspirations they had?
Well, a lot of this comes from the initial drive began probably in the last year of the Spanish Civil War. He went over, he realized that he was doing all this talking about, being this kind of a person, socialism, whatever, communism. He was, I think, in the Communist Youth Organization or something down in LA. And he said, well, all these people are fighting and they're dying over there. I keep talking about things. I need to do something about this, and decided to volunteer to serve. So he went over, got into France, through Spain, through France in early 1939. And by May or June, he was a machine gunner and running around. And he was in a number of the big battles at the very end of the war.
Wow.
He left disillusioned about communism, about any kind of organization, political organization, because he saw how badly it worked. He was nearly put up on a firing squad on trumped up charges. I have some FBI records about this. And so he went on to Catalina Island to kind of chill out, because he was in a barbershop down in LA, but he went over there to kind of just calm down. And he took a life drawing class through the Wrigley Corporation, one of their draftsmen or something was having a life drawing class. Irving wanted to take it, took it, and all of a sudden things just clicked. Things started sparking. Now he had this innate talent, because an uncle saw this early on when he was about 9 or 10 or 11. But by the time they saw it, World War I broke out and the Russian Revolution broke out, and everything just went crazy where he was over in Lithuania. But he came to San Francisco. His first, I think he was in San Francisco by 1940. And it just, of course, by the time he got back from the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, he had a file with the FBI, and they were after him for nearly 30 years, pestering and bothering him. But it was, it's hard to pinpoint. It was like Otto Dix. I know it was inspirational to him, and Bruegel, and some of these earlier some of the artists back in that time, Bruegel's time and other. But it's just something that, it's really hard to explain. It's just something that was within him that he finally was able to let loose, and he was very focused about he didn't want to be distracted by like relationships and this and that. And fortunately, he met Hela Norman, his wife, in 1954. They married, and she saw his work, and they made an agreement that said that, look, I'll work, you paint. So that was the whole thing, the routine they got into from 1954 to 1989 when he passed. And just to allow him that time to come up with these images and put them on paper. And I think being in the Bay Area helped too. I think that there was something about the atmosphere. I know that early on, before he met Hela, he was really into the jazz scene and some of the clubs in downtown San Francisco. He lived in San Francisco for quite a while, then moved to Sausalito and lived there. So he was
hot spots.
Yeah, well, he was. He was. I think that's a good word for him. I think he was quite the bohemian in a way. And
it makes me think. If you'd had a chance to meet him while he was alive, is there one question that you would have liked to have been asked him that just kind of always you wanted to kind of scratch the itch, or you knew that somebody else couldn't answer that?
I would have been a number of questions. One of them would have been about his participation during the Spanish Civil War and what happened there. There was a book written by a man named Alva Bessie, and he was a member of the Spanish Civil War, American Lincoln Brigade for quite a while, quite a number of years before Irving arrived. He did not like Irving at all, and it just had. I think Irving comes strolling in here after 3 years of other people fighting the war. He comes in, Mr. Gung Ho.
Right.
Say, okay, we've got to go kick the fascists. Don't throw your guns around. Do this, do that. Started bossing these people around. What are you, all cowards or something? And he he turned off everybody in the group and nearly came to blows a number of times. And it's written about Alva Bessie's book. I think it's Men in Battle, a really good book about the Spanish Civil War.
Do you think that if you met him in real life, do you think he was a difficult person to be around, or do you think that what drove him was his passion was kind of contagious, I guess, in some way? Do you think that is the work more appealing than the person, or from what you were able to kind of gather of his personality? Would you want to sit and have dinner with him?
Oh, yes, I would, definitely. And it was just not only about the Spanish Civil Wars, but where these ideas come from.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with that fire in 1989, all of his sketchbooks were burned up. So you can't see the genesis of his work. There's maybe a handful of paintings that still have the sketches, the finished sketches and finished drawings, to see how the works would evolve. But other than that, all the other stuff is gone. But sure, he was from what I understand and read, he was a quiet man. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke. But there was a stubborn streak. He was a person who discovered the word freedom back when he was growing up in Lithuania. He was a sort of number 2 child. He had an older sister and 2 younger brothers. So by the time World War I came around, he was about 8 years old. And his father just left the family, left the family for another woman. So his mother had to deal with 2 kids plus Irving. So she gave Irving a lot of freedom to go around. So he I guess he had a really good paper route or somewhere in Lithuania or in Vilnius, and started earning money that way. But he just had this freedom, and that moved over to when he moved to New York in 1923. He was able to go around and get a job and help raise money to bring his mother and his 2 younger brothers over. And he was also, I guess he was also raised to deal with, to be involved with social concerns, the poor, the disenfranchised. He had a very Pollyanna look at what the United States was going to be, because they would get films over there, but they were always films that were probably the silent films that showed how everybody was sort of rich over here and everything. But he was very disillusioned when he finally came over, and he lived in the Lower East Side in Manhattan. No, I guess in Brooklyn somewhere, and lived in the slums in Brooklyn for quite a while until they could get the whole family together and then move to Connecticut. But so there's a lot in his personality. But the one thing that stands out is his love of freedom, and that held true when he got to this country. He was retrained as a barber, and married the boss's daughter in 1929, and they went out to California, and he got a glimpse of Catalina Island for the first time in 1929, and then came back, and then finally moved to California to work as a barber. He couldn't stay put very long in one place until his art sort of forced him to be in one place. And in this area. So he lived, like I said, in Sausalito. He lived somewhere in north of San Rafael, stuff like that. And the only reason why he moved there is because he wanted to put that painting together crucifixion, the 27-foot long one, and he needed a space inside. And he found a house with a tall living room ceilings that he could put the painting up fully if he needed to take a look at the whole thing together and see if it was working. And like I said, he lived, and they found the cabin down in Tanitas Creek, down south of where I am right now. I'm guessing that would be in the 60s, I think, and lived there for whatever it was, 29, almost 28 years.
When you think about it, as we kind of wrap up, I wonder, what do you see his legacy as, and, eventually we're going to, the stay-at-home order will finish and we'll hopefully beat back COVID-19. Right. For those of us in the Bay Area, where we might be able to see some of his, art on display once museums are open?
Well, his legacy. Whew, that's interesting. Well, first of all, he does have work at most of the museums here in the Bay Area. At MoMA, San Francisco, the DeYoung Museum. The Young owns War and Peace, I know that, and a couple of other works. MoMA, San Francisco, the Museum of American Art in Oakland has work, and then all the way over in Sacramento, they do have. Oh, actually, no, I'll take that back. Also, San Jose Museum of Art in San Jose owns 2 or 3 pieces of his there as well. But Irving's work is tough to look at. I mean, he really hits you over the head with the messages, even no matter as abstract as it might be. It's a message of this is what's going on in the world, and it's a universal problem. So it's something that doesn't have a solution probably for right now. And it seems, I don't want to get pessimistic, but after 4 years, it does seem to have gotten worse. And he would just be shaking his head now, I think, and keeping busy painting. Gosh, it's hard to figure what his legacy. Whatever it is in his work that affected me, it keeps me going. It keeps me wanting to push his work. That's why I made the film. That's why the film has been seen now in India, Bangladesh, in Paris, in Germany, in Italy, Singapore, all these places around the world. And it'd be interesting to know what people think about it, because I haven't heard. This is the first time the film's been shown in San Francisco locally, in a way. And it strikes, again, it's one of these things that just strikes people differently. You either love them or hate them. I don't think there's any middle of the road with Irving. Most of the exhibitions they've had, the comment books that they always put out at the end of the exhibition. And I would say out of, stacks and stacks of maybe 500 pages of comments being made, I'd say 85 to 90% of them are positive. Who is this person? Why haven't we seen him before? His work really affects me. And there's a 10% is kind of, you kind of disregard those. I think he's crazy, completely out of his mind. But his work does affect everybody, and it's doing what he wanted it to do. Slowly, maybe not as intense, because you can't put an exhibition like this together that often. And so anyway, I'm probably taking up a lot of time here.
No, I think it's really interesting. Well, Ray, thanks again for sharing the film with us. I think it's a very thought-provoking and a great way kind of to enter Irving Norman's work. And I would just kind of encourage everybody out there to get a chance to hopefully see it in person once the stay-at-home orders lifted. And of course, one of the things that we love about filmmakers like Ray sharing the film is that you get a chance to go on social media and talk about this really cool film and this painter that you discovered. And so please share on social media and let them know, about the film. And Ray, thanks again for being here and being a part of the San Francisco film community.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It's fun.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity.